The Universal One, by Walter Russel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was nothing made which was made. John 1:1. Chapter 1. Creation. Divine mind, God, spirit creation, and the order of creation. In the beginning, God. There is but one God. There is but one universe. God is the universe. God is not one and the universe another. The universe is not a separate creation of God's. It is God. There is no created universe. Nothing is which has not always been. All created things are from the beginning. They have no beginning. They do not come into being. They are and always have been and always will be. Creation means to man the coming into existence of something which was not before in existence. Man's concept of creation is the coming into being of a physical, visible universe heretofore non-existent. The Creator is to man's mind a sublime being separate and apart from man, who created the physical universe of matter, causing to come into being that which had not been. Man holds the concept of two universes, a spiritual and a physical. God is presumed to be of the spiritual universe, perfect. Matter is of the physical universe, imperfect. God supposedly created the imperfect physical universe separate and apart from himself. Man conceives a perfect and omnipotent God. A perfect and omnipotent God could not create imperfection. He could not create a lesser than himself. He could not create a greater than himself. God could not create other than himself. God did not create other than himself, nor greater, nor lesser than himself. In the sense generally understood by man, God did not create anything. Nothing has been created. This is a creating universe, not a created one. Man's concept of the sublime being as the creator of a material universe, different in substance from the spiritual universe, is a misconception. God is all there is. Beyond God, there is nothing. Superior to God, there is nothing. Inferior to God, there is nothing. Opposed to God, there is nothing. Creation is not more, nor is it less than it has always been from the beginning. It cannot be more than God, nor can it be less than God. Creation is an apparent integration in continuity of that which already exists in substance. It is a periodic change of state of the one unchanging substance. It is evolution. Decreation is an apparent disintegration in continuity of apparently integrated things returned to that substance. It is dissolution. God is in reality and exists in substance. God is thinking mind. The substance or body of God is light. The one universal substance, which is God, is a tangible substance, a thinking substance, comprehensible and describable, and possessed of principles which are familiar to man through man's observation of the one universal substance in created things. The substance of all created things is light. The one substance of thinking mind is all that exists. The created universe is the registration in matter of the idea of thinking mind. Mind is expressed in light. Light is the storehouse of the energy of thinking mind. The energy of the universe is the energy of thinking mind. The universe is a universe of energy. Energy is expressed in light. Mind is the universe. Mind substance is spiritual substance. Spirit is light. Spirit is the ultimate, the eternal, though finite substance. Spirit is not infinite. Nothing in this universe of motion is infinite. Man's concept of an infinite God, possessing infinite knowledge and infinite power, creator of an infinite universe of infinite extension, is not in accord with the laws of motion. This is a boundless, eternal, dimensionless universe of definite limitations, both as to all cause and to all effects of cause. Dimension is an illusion of relation of effects, which are in themselves but illusions. All cause is comprehensible too, and all effects are measurable by man. A limited, measurable universe cannot be infinite, and a divinity limited as to his range of cause, which ipso facto limits the possible range of effect, cannot be infinite. Light is the living substance of mind in action. It is the creating principle of the one substance. The one substance is the etheric spiritual substance of the one universal mind. The entire created universe of all that is, ever has been, or ever will be, is but the one substance in motion, light. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. John 1:5. Matter is light. God and matter are one. Spirit and matter are the same substance. That substance is light. There are not two substances in the universe. There cannot be two substances in the universe. The substance of the universal mind is a living substance. That which man calls life is an inherent property of the entirety of mind. Light is life. There is but one life in the universe. The whole of the universe is but one living, breathing, pulsing being. There are not two lives or two living beings in the universe. There are not two of anything in the universe. The universe and all that is one. Chapter 2. The life principle. Life is the pulsing electromagnetic oscillation of thinking mind. All life is immortal life. There is no mortal life. Life is a vitalizing property of all matter. Life is in and of all matter. Man's concept of life is not logical. Man conceives life to be a property apart from matter, quickening compound elements of inorganic matter into living, functioning, organic beings. Man defines organic matter as that in which life begins to function, imbuing it with vitality and intelligence. Man defines inorganic matter as those elements or compounds of matter in which there is no life and in which there is no vitality nor intelligence. Man conceives life as spontaneously generated in matter at favorable temperatures and under favorable conditions. Such concepts are not true concepts. In searching for the life principle, man is attempting to discover something corresponding to a germ which quickens lifeless matter. Life is not a germ, and no matter is lifeless. Life is in and of all things from the beginning, always and forever. Life has no beginning. Life has no ending. Life is eternal. Life is in and of all inorganic as well as all organic matter. Life is in and of all of the elements and the atoms of the elements and the compounds of the elements. Life is in and of the sun of the atom, the planets of the atom, and the heavens surrounding the universe of the atom. Life is the effect produced on the substance of mind by the sequence of alternating electromagnetic pulsations which constitute the process of thinking. The progress of this effect is registered in integrating light and manifests itself in that orderly periodic phenomenon inherent in all matter and all things which man calls growth. All growing things are imbued with the life principle. All things are growing things. All matter is evolving. All matter is growing. All matter is living. Life is merely the registration in matter of states of motion of thinking mind. The substance of mind has the appearance of many states of motion, which man calls the elements of matter. The elements of matter do not vary in substance. They vary only in their states of motion. All motion is periodic and evolutionary. All motion is motion in equilibrium. No other motion is possible. All motion has the appearance of being divided into opposites. These opposites of motion shall henceforth be termed motion in inertia and motion in opposition. All that appearance which man calls matter is motion in opposition. Motion in opposition is under either preponderantly electric or magnetic domination. It is a state of motion where pressures are unequalized and sustained in their state of unequalization by the resistance of the two opposing forces in motion. The point of maximum motion in opposition is the nucleal center of a unit or system where opposing pressures reach their point of maximum pressure. Form of matter disappears into motion in inertia. Motion in inertia is equally electric and magnetic. Neither force dominates. It is a state of motion where pressures are equalized. Man's concept of life is energized organic substance. Man's concept of death is de-energized organic substance. There is no death. Life is eternal. The one substance of the universe cannot become de-energized. Man's concept of life belongs to motion in opposition. Man's concept of death belongs to motion in inertia. Life belongs in principle to motion. This is a universe of motion. The cause of all motion is the dynamic action of thinking of the one universal living being, which man calls God or mind, or by other names, all of which stand practically for the one idea of fatherhood or deity. Thinking is a process, an orderly, evolutionary, periodic process of absolute limitations. All motion of thinking mind is born in the maximum high speed of the universal constant of energy. It runs the gamut of periodic and opposing deceleration and acceleration in 6 full tones, 1 double tone and a master tone, to each of 10 lowering octaves and a variable number of midtones in each of the last 4 octaves. The 7 tones are those so-called elements of matter, which are improperly classified in the 8 groups of the commonly accepted Mendeleev periodic table. All effects of motion which cause the appearance of these elements is that which is herein termed motion in opposition. The master tone of each octave is the record of all motion taking place within the octave. The master tones are the turning points between reaction and action, just as the double tones are the turning points between action and reaction. They are the beginnings of each new expression of energy and motion, and are records of the old. They are the ends of exhalations and the beginnings of inhalations. The master time of each octave is the inheritance of the original motion of the thinking process of mind. These master tones are the inert gases, which are classified in the 0 group of the Mendeleev table. The state of motion of these inert gases is that of motion in inertia. Motion in inertia is that state of pressure equilibrium which lies between any 2 masses. The inertial line, or plane, is that dividing line, or plane, toward which all masses discharge their potential. It is the line, or plane, of lowest potential of 2 opposing areas of potential, where opposing pressures neutralize. This is the plane of minimum pressure of 2 opposing areas. The master tones, which represent a state of motion in inertia and are the inert gases, bear the same relationship to the elements that white bears to the colors. They are a registration of them all. White is not included in the spectrum. It has no place there. The inert gases should not be included in the elements. They have no place there. Of this more shall be written later in its proper place. The 10 octaves constitute a cycle of evolving states of motion. This cycle includes the uttermost limitations of divine possibilities, and beyond it nothing is or can be. The cycle begins with the highest note, and descends the scale sequentially through man's unseen universe, until hydrogen, the first element perceivable to man, is reached. There is no unseen universe. Those tones which follow hydrogen are man's visible or physical universe of matter and continue into the 10th octave. Here, elemental integration and disintegration have ended the cycle by the attainment of the equilibrium of its beginning. All motion is oscillatory, swinging in sequence between 2 apparently opposing forces, gravitation and repulsion, which are respectively electric and magnetic. This oscillatory motion is a pulsating in-breathing and out-breathing, an inhalation, and an exhalation, which is a characteristic of all matter, whether it be in units or systems of units or mass. These two apparently opposite forces are the father-mother forces of mind, which added together make but the one force. There is but one pendulum to the cosmic clock. All the so-called created universe of matter is but the effect of these two apparently opposing female forces exerting their opposition. All motion in opposition is both gravitative and repulsive. This is characteristic of all matter. Motion at the inertial line or plane where mass disappears is neither gravitative nor repellative. Hence, the muter tones, which register effects of motion on this line or plane, should not be included in the table of the elements. All matter is characterized by periodic and alternating opposites of motion in sequence, each opposite being preponderant in sequence. Each opposite force is the cause of the other. Opposition is a characteristic appearance of all effects of motion and has no existence other than as an appearance. In inertia, this appearance always disappears. Motion and matter must not be confounded. Matter, as man understands matter, is only an appearance due to states of motion. The creation of form in matter is the apparent integration of those things which are and always have been. The decreation of form in matter is the apparent disintegration of apparently integrated things. Creation is transmutation or integration of the one simple indivisible substance into the appearance of many complex substances and things. Creation may be likened unto the assembling of a few letters of type for the printing of a very complex idea. Decreation may be likened unto the redistribution of type after it has served its purpose of giving expression to idea on the printed page. Matter is light, crystallized into the complex idea of this universe, exactly as literature is type assembled into the complex ideas of a library. Matter is the registration medium of light, just as letters are the registration medium of literature. Matter is light gravitationally assembled into the appearance of form and radially disassembled into the disappearance of form. The assembling process is what man calls life. The disassembling process is what man calls death. Light exists as light always and forever. All matter is but a variation of the state of light due to variation of dimension of the evidence of motion in the wave by which all motion is expressed. To man, matter means the complexity of many substances and many things. Complexity and variability belong to motion and not to substance. There is but one unchanging substance. The appearance of change does not belong to substance but to motion. Man lives in a universe of motion, a universe of appearances and illusions which deceive him, except for those simple, obvious illusions with which he becomes perfectly familiar. Man will stoutly aver that matter changes, and that there are many substances, but he would not dream of contending that the moon runs along the road behind the trees as he runs. Yet one contention would be as reasonable as the other. Matter and mind and light and energy are eternal. They are constant. They are cause. Form and motion are illusions. They are fleeting. They are effects. Chapter 3, Mind, the one universal substance. Mind is the universe. It is all that is, ever was, or ever will be. Mind is a substance, a material substance. The substance of mind is the foundation of creation. It is the seed of the universe. In the seed of the universe is the whole of the universe. The substance of universal mind has no beginning, no ending, and no bounds. It is all intelligent, all powerful, and all present. The one substance is absolutely frictionless, temperatureless, non-compressible, non-expandable, non-absorbent, non-reflectant, non-resistant, and non-refractive, but potentially it contains the appearance of all these qualities through the dynamic action of those opposing forces within it, which cause it to be a thinking substance in motion. These qualities belong to motion and appear only through motion and opposition. They are not qualities which belong to the one substance. They are appearances which disappear in the inertial plane of pressure equilibrium which lies between any two masses. Hence, they have no existence other than as an appearance of existence. The cause of the appearance of change of the one substance is through change of state, but change of state is not change of substance. Change of state is not an attribute of substance. It belongs to motion. It is an illusion of motion which creates the illusion of dimension. The substance of mind is the one pre-chemical substance, which is the source of all the elements and the compounds of the elements, all of which are but appearances. These appearances register the action of the process of thinking and disappear back into their source of an absolute temperatureless state of motion in inertia. The material substance of mind is an all-pervading ether, which is indivisible, inseparable, indestructible, unalterable, and unchangeable. But potentially it contains the appearance of all these dimensions of separability in the states of motion, which register the dynamic process of thinking. The words spirit and ether are used to express the tenuity of the dimensionless universe, as solidity is used to express the compactness of the apparently measurable universe. States of motion in opposition cause the appearance of change from the state of motion in non-opposition or inertia into the appearance of separability into parts. This results in such effects of motion as heat, cold, color, form, sex, growth, valence, ionization, mass, gravity, radiation, and many others. These effects are not a change of substance, nor do they divide, alter, or separate the one substance of mind. They are but dimensions. All effects have the appearance of dimension. They are in themselves but dimensions of that which they appear to be. The cause of all effects is dimensionless. Cause is existent. Effect is an illusion of existence. It but appears to exist. Change of state appears to change the character of the one substance, but appearances have no existence. Man is accustomed to appearances. Two objects exactly similar appear dissimilar in perspective. This is a universe of appearances, all of which are relative, and not one of which would have even the appearance of existence without the relation of others. Without the illusion of separability, space could not be. Without events, time could not be. Without motion in opposition, neither heat, cold, color, sex, mass, or any of the effects of thinking could be or appear to be. Without the variability of motion in opposition, there could be no appearance of variability in the chemistry of the one substance. Man's many elements are but variances in states of motion in opposition of the one unchanging substance. They all appear to have separate and distinct characteristics of their own in varying degrees, such as melting points, specific gravity, atomic weight, volume, ionization, stability, valence, electromagnetic charge, axial rotation, orbital revolution, and many other characteristics, which give them the appearance of being separate and different substances. They are neither separately created individual things, nor are they different substances. Their appearance of separability and difference of substance is due solely to the periodicity of states of motion in opposition. The universal substance of light is a material substance of variable motion, which is due to the variability of opposition set up by the two apparently opposing forces of action and reaction, which constitute the thinking process. It is apparently shorn or torn into apparent particles of itself during the process of creative thinking, but actually is unseparated and undivided in the process of that shearing or tearing. It is without form, but potentially it contains all that man calls form. Form is but an appearance, an effect of motion in opposition. The greater the opposition of the two opposing forces, the greater the rigidity of form and mass, and the more distinctive is its appearance of existence. All of those elements between the third gravitational and third radiational tones, the atomic structures of which are very much contracted in volume and represent motion in maximum opposition, are the hard, dense, heavy solids of great rigidity. Such metals, for example, as iron, copper, gold, silver, manganese, nickel, and tungsten. The elements which form such compounds as granite, quartz, and flint. And those elements which form such precious stones as the diamond, ruby, and emerald. All these elements are made up of light units in maximum motion in opposition. They are very densely packed together in atomic construction and very closely integrated. Their electric and magnetic orbits are in spirals of one plane and are very much extended. Their melting points are very high. A study of the charts will show this clearly. The less the opposition of the two opposing forces, the less the rigidity of form and mass, and the more indistinct is its appearance of existence. All of those elements which, born near the inertial planes of their octaves, indicate by their tonal position on their octave waves a close relation to motion in inertia and a lessening degree of opposition, are the softer, less distinct substances. Such elements and compounds as lithium, bromine, sodium, chlorine, salt, sulfur, potassium, iodine, tellurium, magnesium, strontium, and rubidium are formed of light units of less potential energy. The atomic structure of these elements is not closely integrated but is open, nebulous, and very much expanded. Their electric and magnetic orbits are in spirals of many planes, approaching nebulosity in appearance as their position nears their inertial planes. Their melting points are very low. A study of the charts will show this clearly. Form, therefore, is not an attribute of the one substance and has no existence other than as an appearance. Form, like time, space, mass, color, weight, temperature, and other effects of motion, is an attribute of motion only, and in no way an attribute of substance. Bubbles, whirling in the substance of water, have form. Their form is but an attribute of their whirling motion, and is not of the substance of water. When the motion ceases, form disappears, but the substance remains. Creation is merely a swing of the cosmic pendulum from inertia through energy and back again to inertia, forever and forever. It is but a series of opposing pulsations of action and reaction, integration and disintegration, gravitation and radiation, appearance and disappearance. The one universal mind is a formless thinking substance. If the one substance were not a thinking substance, that which man calls creation would not have been. That which man calls God is an ecstatic thinking substance, thinking in continuity, thinking rhythmically, thinking with orderly variation of intensity in measurable impulses throughout endless ages, in endless space. Thinking is an action which is the cause of all motion. It is a process, a purely mechanical process, periodic in its evolution through one cycle after another, without end. The process of thinking leaves the evidence of that process behind it, registering the effect of its passage through the ocean of the universal mind. In its wake are myriads of rotating particles of the one substance, which register the thinking of mind. Just as in the wake of an ocean steamer are myriads of tiny rotating bubbles which register the passage of that steamer. The many bubbles in the wake of the steamer produce an effect of foam in the ocean substance, which appears to be different from the surrounding substance. It is the same substance but of less stability. The whirling bubbles of foam owe their appearance of stability to motion. When the motion ceases, the bubbles will disappear. The wake of the steamer is an appearance which we know will disappear. It has no stability. It has only an appearance of stability. The bubbles are apparently separate individuals possessing form and motion, which are apparently their own, but which we know are not their own. Their appearance of separateness, we know, is but an illusion due to force and motion. When the churning effect of the propeller has been dissipated, foam, bubbles, wake, and all will disappear into the mighty ocean of which they are a part and from which they have never been separated. The passage of all thought through the tranquil ocean of universal mind may well be likened unto the passage of big boats and little boats and all the winds of heaven upon the tranquil ocean of waters. The passage of all these forces leave their effects in appearance upon the ocean of waters, registering thereon in foam the idea of those forces. Without the exertion of these forces upon the tranquil waters, an absolute uniformity of appearance would prevail throughout the ocean of waters. Without the force of thinking throughout the tranquil substance of mind, there would be no appearance of variability whatsoever in the universe of mind. There would be no form. The distinct spiral nebula of Perseus, or the trail of the Milky Way looming against the ocean of mind, is exactly analogous to the foamy wake of a steamer as viewed from a great height. Both the wake of the steamer and the nebula of Perseus are appearances due to the passage of ponderous ideas, and both will disappear back into the substance of which they are a part. The myriad whirling spheres of the nebula, its integrating suns and solar system, its planets and moons, its asteroids and meteorites, are all whirling forms born of the churning propeller of the one mind, thinking out this universe of ours. Similarly, the whirling spheres of the steamer's wake, with its big bubbles, its lesser bubbles, and its milky foam, are a line of white against the deep blue sea, but not separate from the sea in substance. The temperature in the wake of the steamer is higher than that of the surrounding water. Similarly, the temperature of the spiral nebula is higher than that of the surrounding ether matter, because of the heat energy generated by thinking and transferred to the whirling spheres. The law governing both bubbles and nebula is the same. The difference between them is only relative in point of time. Both disappear when they cease to whirl, for their appearance of existence is due solely to the heat energy of motion. A bubble may whirl for a few moments and a sun for 100 billion years before their generated heat becomes radiated into their father-mother substance, which gave them birth. The difference in time is but relative, for time is nothing in eternity. When the bubbles have radiated their heat to the temperature of the surrounding water, they cease all appearance of individual existence. Their forms have disappeared with cessation of motion, but their substance is as existent as the ocean is existent. When giant suns have radiated their heat to the absolute zero of the surrounding ether substance of mind, they cease all appearance of individual existence. Their forms have disappeared with the cessation of motion, but their substance is as eternal as mind is eternal. Creation. All form is generated from the one source of thinking mind by a preponderance of the concentrative contractive pressures of the centripetal force of thinking. Decreation. All form is radiated back into the one source of thinking mind by a preponderance of the decentrative, expansive pressures of the centrifugal force of thinking. Chapter 4. Thinking Mind. The process of thinking is a simple one. It is a swing of the cosmic pendulum from the stability of mind substance to apparent instability, and back again to stability. The registration of this effect in the ocean of universal mind is contained within the form of an elongated sphere, and all its variability and complexity may be read upon two exactly opposite spiral waves within two halves of that sphere. light, heat, electricity, magnetism, form, crystallization, sound, mass, the elements and compounds of elements, time, space, attraction, gravitation, force, energy, inertia, sex, life, death, sleep, memory, the souls of all things, and the complex ideas of all things. In fact, all that man can comprehend of this universe can be spelled out in their beginnings on these two opposing spiral waves within one sphere, and on through to their endings in 9 other increasingly larger though flattening spheres, or ellipsoids. These two opposing spiral waves within one sphere represent the entire simple process of thinking, but not the entire variability of the effect of thinking. They represent the beginning or highest octave in the cycle of thinking, of which there are 10. The simple process of thinking is repeated exactly in the 10 octaves, but with periodic variability and complexity of registered effect. All variability and complexity of registered effect is orderly in variation and complication, and thus are all effects comprehensible to that man who has knowledge of the cause of those effects. Everywhere throughout its entirety the mind substance is in constant agitation, undergoing the orderly process of thinking, the force called thinking, which impels mind into concentration and decentration in sequence, is the only energy of the universe. There is no other energy. The universe is mind only. The universal constant of energy registers, in the substance of mind, the illusions caused by the thinking of mind. Every microscopic point in divine mind becomes the center of the universe of mind, with its first impulse of the act of thinking. For with this first impulse is form born into a universe which is without form. From that center, the explosive, reactive, genera-radiative, electromagnetic disturbance which constitutes the process of thinking reproduces itself throughout the entirety of the universe at incomprehensible speed in waves of creating light units, which waves return again to that exact center. Thinking is an action followed by a reaction of that action. The action of thinking constitutes a series of events in sequence. The intervals between events in sequence constitute that effect of motion called time. Without a sequence of events, time could not be, for there would be nothing to mark time. Time begins with the action of thinking. It is an effect which appears with motion in opposition and disappears into motion in inertia. The events in sequence which give birth to that appearance called time are the opposing pulsations of generative and radiative light. These opposing pulsations give dimension and form to that which man calls life. To man, there is no life without form. Form and dimension are fleeting. Life is eternal. Life is merely the action of thinking, and thinking is as eternal as the thinking substance of mind is eternal. Universal thinking is rhythmic thinking. The entire substance of universal mind is thinking in varying but orderly rhythmic meter. The meter of universal thinking is measurable in its orderliness throughout the entirety of the universal substance. The tempo of the cosmic rhythmic meter of thinking is absolute. All thinking is expressed in measurable and opposing impulses of opposing motion. All motion is action and reaction. Chapter 5. The process of thinking. The action impulse and the reaction impulse of the thinking process are alternating between the apparent opposites known as generation and radiation. Generation and radiation are opposites which constitute the appearance of motion in opposition. Generation is the attractive, gravitative, positive electric force, and radiation is the repulsive, emanative, negative magnetic force. All motion, whether in opposition or in inertia, is in equilibrium. That is to say, the amount of energy expended in any two opposite swings of the cosmic pendulum is always quantitatively constant. The apparent variation is in the dimension of the two opposing swings and is not of the constant of energy. The amount of generative and radiative energies expended in the two opposing oscillations, anywhere in the entire 10 octaves, when added together, total the same in the amount of energy expended. Motion in inertia is characterized by an absolute lack of what man calls valence, which is grabbing power or uniting power. All of the elements of matter in motion in opposition have this uniting power in varying degree or periodicity, just as they have periodicity in electromagnetic charge and other variations. Hence, a further reason for disassociating the inert gases or master tones from the elements. Opposing impulses of thinking are generated out of inertia and radiated back into equalization in inertia. These impulses are alternating between generation and radiation in a periodicity of preponderance, which periodicity is measurable by man in many ways. All matter is apparently evolving and devolving into the illusion of many substances of many dimensions. So-called solids of matter are variations of apparent states of motion registering in form the idea of thinking mind, and sustained in their appearance as solids of matter by electric preponderance over magnetism. The electric nature of matter and its progressive periodicity and variation of electromagnetic charge, rotation of its light units, and other periodicities will be written down with more exactness when the process of thinking is more explicitly written down and charted. Suffice it here to say that thinking is the electrogenerative action and magneto-radiative reaction of mind. Thinking is a simple process of very complex effects, the sequence of which will be written in its proper place. The electromagnetic opposition of mind, as expressed in the process of thinking, is the source of all of the energy of the universe. Thinking, then, is a process of generation of motion in variable opposition out of a state of maximum motion in non-variable inertia, and of radiation back again into that state. The inertial line is that hypothetical line of absolute non-opposition between the oscillations of the two opposing forces of motion. At the inertial line, the two opposing forces are neutralized and in equilibrium. At the inertial line, there is no force back of motion, but there is the impetus of the magnetic radiative pulsation, which continues motion across the inertial line without force. Once across the line, motion is continued by the electrogenerative pulsation until magnetic conquest causes it to rebound. That state of motion, which continues motion without force back of it, will be known as inertial energy. The inertial line, or plane, might be characterized as the axis along which wave expressions of the universal constant of energy are born. The mechanic might characterize it as the dead center between force and force, where no force exists. This point can only be passed by the impetus given to an object in motion prior to its arrival at that point. Motion is continuous as thinking is continuous. The universe breathes, inhaling and exhaling as man breathes, and as every light unit, atom, and molecule breathes, and as everything in the firmament above and the waters below breathes. Exhalation and inhalation in sequence is a characteristic of all phenomena of matter. Motion is caused by the sequence of opposing impulses of thinking. All direction of motion and effects of motion are governed by these equally balanced gravitative and repulsive and equally balanced decelerative and accelerative forces. The opposition of the two apparently opposing forces, which cause apparently opposite impulses, forms spiral waves along which the idea produced in thinking is registered. The registered idea of thinking is expressed gravitatively in what man calls the elements of matter, and repulsively in what man calls the magnetic flow, or magnetic lines of force in heretofore unknown magnetic orbits. All elements of matter are radiative or radioactive, just as all matter is generative or generoactive. Electrically generating elements and magnetically radiating lines of force are the same force exerted in apparently opposite directions. The former is centripetal, and its direction is toward the nucleal, center of a closing spiral. The latter is centrifugal, and its direction is away from the center toward the opening spiral. Their difference is but a rising or lowering of potential. One always becomes the other. Each is the cause of the other. Radioactivity is a lowering of potential into higher octaves of elements of greater speed but lesser power. Generoactivity is the increasing of potential into lower octaves of greater power and lesser speed. Generoactivity builds the elements. Radioactivity tears them apart. The elements are composed of apparently separate particles in motion, which shall henceforth be called light units or corpuscles. The spiral genero-radiative waves are the medium of reproduction of idea throughout the entirety of the universe. All idea of mind produced by thinking is reproduced throughout the entirety of the universe of mind in measurable waves of electromagnetic opposition. These apparently opposing genero-radiative waves constitute the creating and decreating universe of integrating and disintegrating elements of potential energy, which man calls the created physical universe. Man has measured the speed at which the energy of light appears to travel along waves as 186,400 miles per second. This measure is the highest measure of the perceptible impulses of universal thinking. This is the measure of energy reproduction, which man calls the speed of light. Man's concept of the speed of light as being uniform is a wrong concept. To man, light is incandescent luminosity. To man, that which is not glowingly incandescent is not light. All matter is light. This universe is one of light. Solids of matter, heavy, dark, and cold, are as much light as flaming Arcturus. Luminosity is but a state of intensely unequalized and opposing motion, sustained in its state of unequalized motion by the generation of high pressures. It is but one state of the substance of mind in motion, a state which is within a limited range of electromagnetic charge, temperature, and opposition, a range which varies in intensity in each octave, but which runs the whole gamut of its limitations in the 10-octave cycle. Incandescent luminosity is but the state of maximum opposition of the two apparently opposing forces, and a state in which radiative resistance to generation is at its maximum. A state in which contraction by maximum genero-active accumulation of time into power is resisting expansion by radiative dissipation of power into time, of which much will be written in its proper place. Incandescent luminosity is that state of motion which will be known as the high potential of a system, or an octave. It is the meeting place of centripetal and centrifugal forces, of preponderantly male and preponderantly female, of maximum electromagnetic opposition, and it is the state of maximum registration of heat. It is the turning point where the power of electricity to generate mind substance into the appearance of form yields to the power of magnetism to radiate it back into the disappearance of form. Man's speed of light is the speed at which that state of motion in opposition, known as incandescent luminosity, appears to travel through those high octaves of integrating matter which man calls empty space, or the ether of space. This measure of light is but the high measure of a great range of apparent speeds. All of the elements of matter in all states of motion are but orderly and periodic variations of the one substance, light. As there are innumerable states of motion of the substance of light, so also are there innumerable so-called speeds of light. All of the elements of matter are spread out progressively in varying states of simultaneously decelerative and accelerative motion in opposition on the 10-octave waves, like successive tones of music. All motion in opposition is simultaneous in its opposition. The state of luminosity belongs to all of the elements and varies with the state of integration of each element. It is periodic and orderly in its variation, as the elements are periodic and variable in their integrative weight or mass. Matter, which is apparently non-luminous, is simply matter which has become sufficiently retarded generatively and sufficiently expanded radiatively to bring it below the range of motion in opposition, which produces the appearance of luminosity. All solids of matter are but integrated light, the generative units of which are sufficiently retarded in their motion, and their resistance to integration sufficiently extended in magnetic orbits to bring them below the range of the state of apparent luminosity. Chapter 6. Thinking is registered in matter. It has elsewhere been written that matter is the registration of the divine idea of thinking mind. Man is familiar with the thinking process in his own daily experiences. Consider for a moment the concentrative thinking of man in conceiving idea. Is not the idea at first nebulous? And as man concentrates electrically in his thinking, is not the idea more and more distinct in form? And does not that form remain clear and distinct so long as man concentrates dynamically upon thinking that idea? When man's concentration relaxes, does not the idea become more and more nebulous in form and more indistinct until it is but a memory? Just so with the thinking of the one universal mind. The concentration of all mind is electropositively registered in motion, and its intensity and relaxation of intensity are chemically noted in states of motion of the very mind substance, which performs the action and reaction of the thinking process. The intense, concentrated expression of idea in generative thinking is chemically registered in definite, distinct, rigid form, while the relaxed, less intense, expanding expression of idea in electronegative, radiative thinking is chemically registered in indefinite, indistinct, nebulous form. If the universal mind is without form within itself, if its light units and mass are but appearances of form due to motion and not to substance, so also is mind in its entirety without form or shape or size. The universe of mind is neither bounded nor boundless, for it has no extension or continuation. Apparent separability is a necessary quality in creating the illusion of a universe of extension or continuation. The one substance of divine mind is non-separable, non-extendable, and non-continuous. The apparent parts of mind have an apparent relationship to one another, as the appearance of separability of the mind substance is but an effect of motion, then also is the appearance of relationship of one apparent part to another but an illusion due to motion. Relationship of matter is but an appearance and has no existence. And that which man calls relativity is but an illusion, just as that which man calls perspective is but an illusion. Relativity is the science of an illusion in 4 dimensions, as perspective is in 3. God is light. Light, as man knows light, is but an unstable simulation of the real light of the universal one. Man's concept of light is luminosity, an illusion of the universal light of inertia, sustained in its appearance as an illusion of light by the pressures generated through motion. The inner mind of ecstatic man knows the real light, and that he is one with light. He is not deceived by its illusion. Chapter 7. Concerning appearances. During man's evolution in a universe of motion, the complexity of appearances have bewildered him into forming wrong concepts of reality and unreality. Man's life has been given so ardently to the observance of complex phenomena of appearances that appearances have become his facts, and the one reality has become mere conjecture. Man thinks of dependability in terms of solids, those apparent things which respond to his senses. His dependable reality is form and matter. Man thinks undependability in terms of things etheric, those things which do not respond to his senses. His unreality is spirit. Man must learn to alter his concept of the reality of solidity to the reality of mind as the source of the illusion of that solidity. He must learn that the one substance of mind is the only reality. He must learn to consider form as only an appearance of reality in a lower octave of the material substance of mind, over which he has control within the limitations of mind. He must learn to consider matter as the substance of mind and form in matter as but the registration of his thinking. He must learn that he is mind and that mind is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Until man learns that he is mind, he will be the slave of the illusions of mind, instead of which he may be their master and a creator of these illusions. Man's universe is a universe of motion. Man's body is an aggregate of particles in motion. Man is accustomed to motion. His mind is adjusted to apparent facts of matter, which cannot be actual facts, for they are all conditioned by space, time, and motion. A conditioned fact cannot be a fact. It merely appears to be a fact. That a certain ball weighs a pound is a conditioned fact. Apparently the ball does weigh that much. The fact is conditioned upon keeping the ball at the same distance from the ground. Lift it 1 foot and it weighs less than a pound. Keep it at the same height and still its weight varies with the movement of the stars in space. That a ball drops to the ground in a vertical line is a conditioned fact. Apparently the ball does drop straight toward the earth. In reality, the line is curved, the curve being conditioned by the rotation of the earth and its movement through space. This idea may be clarified by imagining a man suddenly created, full-grown, and highly educated. This man differs from other men in only one respect. He has not had a lifetime during which to adjust his mind to the relativity of things in his universe of motion as others have had. He knows all the supposed facts of things, but he has still to learn their apparent relationships. He has yet to find that things seem to be what he knows they are not. Such a man would find himself in a most bewildering world, a world of very complex effects of very simple causes. He knows that men are of about the same size, yet before him is a giant, a huge man among pygmies. The man 10 feet away must be a dwarf, and the group across the street mere toys. The sun he knows to be vast, hot and white, and the world small in comparison. Yet the sun is only a dinner plate and deliciously warm. Lo, it turns red and plunges into the sea. The world is huge and has swallowed the little sun. He knows the world is round, but here it is before him flat. A speck appears upon the horizon. It can be nothing. In an hour, it is a little boat like those in the children's pond, to be carried home on the end of a string. Yet there are 1,000 tons in that toy, and 50 men curse up wind as they reef their sails with the brine of the wind in their eyes, and the howl of the wind in their ears. The moon rushes out from behind the hill, and runs as he runs, and stops as he stops. Just a little moon it is, with toy mountains. It runs away, and hides behind some chimney pots. That mountain is blue, and this one green. That one is flat like a stage drop scene. This one has fields with gray stone walls, and roads with many trees. That is a very little mountain, for lo, the ox on the ridge has blotted it out. It is gone. No, here it is back again, and the ox is gone. Where did the mountain go? How did it come back? And where is the ox gone? The road on the opposite hill stands on its end, but it lowers itself as he goes down the road on his hill. And the opposite hill itself flattens. It squats down behind the trees on his road, or do the trees rise up and grow gigantic as he moves? The iron rails, spreading wide at his feet, meet in a point out there, A railroad train grows from a speck to a match, to a box, and thunders past, a ponderous thing, shaking the earth in its fearsome passing. What magician has wrought this miracle? This new made man knows of the majesty of 10 billion suns, which blaze in the firmament of night. Their hot fire pits swirl in 100,000-mile pools of swirling. Where is the glory of these fearsome orbs? Their ardent fires are twinkling candles snuffed out by breathing of soft blown winds. The Milky Way is but a mist blown across the darkness of night. For such a man time only could adjust his mind to the relativity of appearances and the conditions of facts. Ah, wheel! The universe of man is but a kaleidoscope turning, ever turning, and complexing with its turning. This universe of form is a universe of integration, disintegration, and reintegration. All form integrates through that contractive, gravitative state of motion, which has the apparent power of attracting particles in motion into closer proximity to each other, disintegrates through that expansive, repulsive, radiative state, which has the apparent power of separating particles in motion, and reintegrates through a union of both forces by regenerative impact in inertia. Chapter 8. The Sex Principle. Sir Oliver Lodge points out that man has long been familiar with force and motion, but that some third intangible undiscovered force is recognizably necessary to complete a logical universe. Force and motion infer that the third undiscovered force is existent somewhere back of or with them. He also states that when discovered, it may prove to be something with which man is already familiar. Sex is the great third principle. Sex is the controlling cause of both force and motion. Without it, neither could continue. To say that mind is the motive power back of force and motion is but stating a generality. But to state an attribute of mind by means of which force and motion are controlled is being specific. Sex is the motive power behind force and motion. Sex is the apparent division or the father-mother substance of mind into apparent opposites. This division is due to the opposite desires of electricity and magnetism expressed in the action and reaction of the thinking process. Sex is the active desire of mind for division into opposites and its reactive desire for unity. Sex is that motive force which demands separability into two and equally desires union of the apparent two into one. Mind, being one, cannot yield to the desire of mind for separation into two. Sex desire of mind for divisibility into two succeeds only in producing an appearance of divisibility into two. Likewise, sex desire of mind for unity into one succeeds only in reproducing an apparent composite of the two. Sex is of all things from the beginning. Sex begins when light begins. Sex is the desire for the appearance of being which constitutes the appearance of existence. Nothing can be without the desire to be. All things are which desire to be. Desire dominates all thinking. Desire dominates all matter. All desire is sex desire. All desire is for the continuance of existence in the orderliness of existence. Sex desire is that force in thinking which continues thinking. Existence is continued only through thinking. Sex force is that quality in the electromagnetic impulse of thinking which continues one impulse of thinking into the next impulse of thinking. Sex force, like all phenomena of motion, is periodic. Sex periodicity continues the simple beginning of idea into the complexity of idea. Sex force is the builder of the apparently many things out of the reality of the one thing. Periodic variance of sex is the father of desire for the creation of the idea of many things. Remove the image-making faculty of the father force of mind, and the production of idea would discontinue. Variance of sex is the mother of desire for unity of sex. remove the sex desire of mind for the unity of oneness of the mother force of mind, and reproduction of the idea of mind would discontinue. Matter cannot continue its appearance of existence as form without the desire to continue such an appearance of existence. The material substance of mind cannot evade its materialization into the form desired by mind. This is an immutable law to which there can be no exception. Man's concept of sex as beginning with organic life is a wrong concept. Sex is as absolute in the elements as in the complexities and compounds of the elements. Man's concept of the beginning of sex and the beginning of life is a concept founded on conditions of temperature. Sex and life and light and intelligence are in and of all things from the beginning. The sex principle is as much a part of the granite rock or bar of iron as it is of man. The great hot star called Argo, blazing away at a temperature of 30,000 degrees, knows sex in its fiery heart and cannot continue its appearance without it. The Martian ice cap knows sex in its frozen depths and retains its appearance because of sex. Sex is an electromagnetic equalizer of matter in motion. Sex is the apparent division of the one force into electricity and magnetism, two opposite forces, positive and negative, which are in reality but two pulsations of the one force. Sex is the apparent division of all things into their opposites, male and female. Sex is evolutionary in all things. All things are both male and female. All creation is first male in preponderance, then it is similarly female. All light units and systems of light units are first male-female, then they are female-male. Apparent opposites of the indivisible substance of universal mind are not content to remain in the state of apparent opposition. Unity or oneness, inherent in all things, asserts itself in dissatisfaction when electromagnetic forces of matter in motion are sufficiently generative to cause too great an inequality between the apparent opposites. Sex is unsatisfied when the electromagnetic forces of matter in motion are unequal, and it is satisfied when those forces are equal. A lightning flash is the power of sex, equalizing positive and negative electromagnetic disturbances of equilibrium between two oppositely and unequally charged storm clouds. In motion, in inertia, sex desire is negative. In motion, in opposition, sex desire is positive. It is dynamic. Sex first asserts itself in form. All form appears through sex, passes through a progressive change called growth, and disappears. All growth is impelled by force and motion and controlled by sex. Neither sex nor force nor motion is of itself alone. Each is of the others. Nothing is of itself alone. There can be no force without thinking. There can be no motion without the force of thinking. There can be no idea of mind without sex opposition. There can be no continuity of idea without sex union. Without union and mating, the idea of any one thing would be extinct as an appearance. Thinking and working are the causes of those elements which man calls sex, force, and motion. Without all three of these, there could be no appearance of existence as man knows existence. Thinking and working continue the appearance of all idea from the high to the low octaves of creation. All creating things are but the ideas of divine mind. The whole idea of all things is in the seed of all things. In the seed of idea is the whole of idea. In the seed of the oak is the whole of the oak. In the seed of the rose is the whole of the rose. In the seed of man is the whole of man. The seed of all idea is in thinking. The whole idea of the oak, or the rose, or man, is the result of thinking and working for perhaps 1 billion years of continuing the idea of the oak, the rose, or man in the seed thereof. This is the law of evolving existence. It is as true of complex as it is of simple things. All idea is registered in the little particles heretofore referred to as light units. These units of light, heat, sex, electricity, and magnetism are all male and all female. Every unit is either preponderantly male or preponderantly female. Just so is every unit either preponderantly electric or preponderantly magnetic. Just so is every unit either preponderantly negatively or preponderantly positively electromagnetic. Just so is every unit preponderantly generative or preponderantly radiative, and each unit is all of these. And each unit is variable, becoming preponderantly one or another of these in its turn from the beginning to the end of its being. And the variability is orderly and governed by measurable laws of periodicity, which are also the laws by which motion is governed. It must not be forgotten that all that man calls creation is the result of motion, which is due to the opposing impulses of thinking. It must not be forgotten that a continuance of motion causes a creating and not a created universe. The electromagnetic action of the impulses of thinking is continuous in its opposing, and therefore are the effects of that opposition continuous. Opposing desire and sex expression is the cause of opposing motion. A cause cannot evade its effect. Opposing electromagnetic impulses are sex expression in creative thinking. Opposing electromagnetic impulses reproduce all effects of creative thinking. Form is born true to the rhythm of thinking. All thinking is rhythmic thinking. Idea is synchronous with the rhythm of thinking. All thinking is sex thinking. Creation is the transforming of the one substance by the rhythmic thinking of idea into apparent opposites, and into that which man calls form. Beyond this there is no more. Creation is but a concept of mind. It is but an illusion, an effect of thinking. All thinking is registered in light. All light is sex expression. Light is the language of all thinking. Light is the energy of all thinking. All energy is the energy of sex expression. There is no other energy. Through evolving sex, light causes the transition of the universal substance into form. Through sex periodicity, light transforms form into variety of form. This universe of motion is a universe of production, destruction, and reproduction. All form is produced by the male, electropositive, plus action of the charging electric oscillation of the universal life principle is destroyed by the female electronegative minus reaction of the discharging magnetic oscillation, and is reproduced through the union of both by radioactive regeneration in inertia. Chapter 9. Sex opposites of light. Light is the power which God has used to create the appearance of form. Light is power for man to use in the perfection of his body. Therefore must he know the cause of light as he knows his alphabet. He must understand the inexhaustible source of energy which continues matter in motion, if he would know the fullness of energy available to his command. The rhythm of creative thinking is absolute. The registration of creative thinking is absolute. All thinking is creative thinking. All thinking is creating that which it is thinking. Man's power of thinking is in sex opposition of mind. God's power of expressing himself is in transforming that which is his own body into an effect which man calls creation. The universal one has no other means of expressing idea save through his own body. Man's power of expressing the idea of himself is only through his own body. Man has expressed himself through the creation of his own body by his own thinking, exactly as God has expressed himself through the creation of his own body by his own thinking. Man's body is but an individual effect of the whole of man and is the product of his thinking. The universe is the total of all individual effects and is the product of God's thinking. God's thinking is man's thinking. All thinking is the product of mind, and all mind is divine mind. Again must it be written, there are not two minds, nor are there two kinds of minds in the universe. Light is God's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Light is man's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Creation of that which man calls form has a perpetual beginning and a perpetual ending. Its beginning is in thinking. Its end is in thinking. Its beginning is its ending. It has no beginning. It has no ending. There is no stop, no break in the continuity of thinking. To man, its beginning is its appearance within his octaves of perception. To man, its ending is its disappearance beyond his range of perception. Form is born of the desire to express idea. Form is the plaything of idea. All form is form of sex. Idea is never satisfied with form. Form of idea is continuously changing with the process of thinking. Form is born anew with each impulse of thinking. Idea is reasserted in new form with each impulse of thinking. All idea of mind is integrated through generative or male sex thinking. All idea of mind is disintegrated through radiative or female sex thinking. All idea of mind is reproduced through the regenerative union of sex thinking, which is equilibrium of sex. Idea of mind may mature or evolve only through sex union. Consider any idea of mind, whether that of individual man or of the universal one. Man thinks idea. Thinking is the force of motion. All motion is expressed in waves. All waves of motion are both male and female. All motion is oscillatory action and reaction. Action is male, reaction is female. All idea is registered in light as an appearance of the form of idea. Form of substance is electromagnetic. This means that it is preponderantly male and preponderantly female in periodicity. All idea evolves from idea into form of idea, which in turn devolves back again into idea. Evolution is growth. Devolution is dissolution. Evolution is male. It is electrically preponderant. Devolution is female. It is magnetically dominant. Man can only mature idea through the orderly periodicities of sex thinking. To evolve idea, he must think in light. Generoactive light is the creative force of sex thinking. Radioactive light is the decreative force of sex thinking. Union of these two opposites into the constant of one, which is in equilibrium and has impacted in inertia, is the reproductive force. Sex is a dimension of the illusion of form, and as such it will be further considered with other dimensions of illusion, which will be written down and charted. Chapter 10, The Reproductive Principle. Reproduction means the repetition of a state of motion. Reproduction is repetition. All phenomena of nature are repetitive. All states of motion are repetitive. All idea of mind is repetitive. Idea of mind is the product of thinking. Repetition of idea is the reproduction of that product. This is a universe of repetition of motion. This is a universe of reproduction. This universe of cause and effect is perpetual and continuous as to cause and repetitive as to all effects of cause. All effect is caused by thinking and registered in motion. All motion is either an action or reaction of its cause. Nothing is produced as an effect of thinking that is not either the action or reaction of force expressed in motion. That which is produced must be reproduced. No state of motion ever ends. All states of motion are forever reproduced. All states of motion of apparently separate things are actions and reactions of the force which produced them. All varying idea of mind is registered in separate states of motion, which have measurable dimensions. The reproduction of all idea is the result of union of the action and reaction, which register that idea. Every action is male, every reaction is female, every action is electropositive, every reaction is electronegative, every action has its equal and opposite reaction. Every action and every reaction is a tone in an octave of the universal constant of energy. Equal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, comprise a unit of an octave of the universal constant of energy. An action and its opposite reaction are not two. Their energies, when combined, make one. Reaction is born of action, and action is born again of reaction. All idea and all forms of idea are the result of union between equal or unequal opposite actions and reactions of force. Perfection of mating lies in the union of exactly equal and opposite male actions and female reactions. In perfection of union lies stability. Imperfection of mating lies in the union of unequal and opposite male actions and female reactions. In imperfection of union lies instability. Unequal actions and reactions will unite with unwillingness, which increases in proportion to their degree of departure from exact equality in opposition. When the potentials of the opposites are too far removed from equality, then will union cease. In organic life, the union or reproduction of opposites is limited, and beyond the limitations, reproduction is impossible. In the chemistry of inorganic life, the unstable union of unequal and opposite states of motion is also limited, and beyond the limitations, union and reproduction is impossible. Why? This is a universe of reproduction of idea in accumulated potential of the constant of energy, of registration of the soul of idea in inertia, and of reproduction of accumulated potential. The idea of all things is produced by union of opposite actions and reactions under conditions favorable to union, and is reproduced only under similar conditions. Reproduction is governed by the following laws. Unions of opposed actions and reactions are possible only within certain limitations. When union does not take place, there can be no reproduction. Equal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are satisfied in their unions and will remain united. Stable unions will always reproduce true to species. Unequal and opposite actions and reactions, when united, are unsatisfied in their unions and will always seek their true tonal mates. Unsatisfied unions are unstable unions. Unstable unions never reproduce true to species. Unstable unions tend to return to their separate tonal states. If either mate in an unstable union finds a more equal mate, it will always leave the former and go to the latter. That which is true of chemical unions is true of all species of organic life. Every chemist knows to a certainty that he can break up any unstable compound formed by the union of unequal opposites by merely introducing an element which is more nearly a true tonal mate to either of the united elements. Consider, for example, a chemical union between the male action sodium, which is 601 of the 6th octave, with selenium, which is 702 of the next octave, an unequally opposite female. The introduction of iodine, 801 of the 8th octave, will cause sodium to leave selenium and combine with iodine to form the more stable compound sodium iodide. Introduce bromide, 701 of the 7th octave, and sodium will in turn leave iodine to form sodium bromide, a still more stable compound. Finally, introduce chlorine, which is the true mate, 601 of the 6th octave, and sodium will leave the bromine in order to form the very stable compound, sodium chloride. No element of any octave whatsoever can displace chlorine from its union with sodium. Chemically, every element is both alkaline and acid, but it is preponderantly one or the other. All male electropositive elements are preponderantly alkaline. All female elements are preponderantly acid. The alkaline male actions, when united with equal and opposite acid female reactions, are neutralized. They become salts. Alkaline male actions, united with unequal acid female reactions, accentuate the acidity or alkalinity. Hydrogen, united with its true mate, halionon, becomes a neutral salt. Hydrogen and fluorine will unite as an acid. Hydrogen and chlorine will unite as a stronger acid. All acids or alkalis increase in their strength as their resentment of unequal union increases. Likewise, the ability to reproduce decreases as the acidity or alkalinity of such unions increases. Chemical elements in union reproduce by the same process by which all other states of motion reproduce. Of this, more will be written when further consideration of causes make the effects of those causes more comprehensible. All male actions are centripetal, and all female reactions are centrifugal. Variance of centripetal or centrifugal force is variation of potential. Union and reproduction are always governed by sex periodicity in electromagnetic charge, the order of which will be written down and charted. Consider, for example, the reproduction of the sound of the human voice echoing in the hills. Sound, like all other forms of energy, is an accumulated potential. Release this high potential and it immediately expands. Expansion is radiation. Radiation is discharge of accumulated potential. As the sound of the voice, as accumulated potential radiates into the silence of higher octaves of lower potential and impacts against the closely integrated high potential of the cliffside, the degenerative discharge is reversed and becomes generative charge. Expanding lowering potential is reversed to contracting higher potential. In other words, the sex opposites in the radiating sound waves are forced into closer contact by the impact, so that the wave dimensions which originally produced the sound are restored. The counterpart of the sound as cause has been produced as a reproduced effect of that cause. It is not the same sound, it is another sound. It is a reproduced counterpart, a regenerated reincarnation of the state of motion which originally produced the sound. That which is true of regeneration by echo is also true of reproduction by radio or any other similar process. All are but the reversal of radiation into regeneration by impact against the inertial planes of higher potentials. Generation or regeneration is an effect of gravitation, an impact of radiative energy against any lower octave of integration will set up the necessary resistance to the radiative energy to regenerate it into its original form. Chapter 11. Energy Transmission. Some old misconceptions must now be corrected by a brief statement of principles, the full explanations of which will be given in their proper order. That light travels, energy is transmitted, electricity is conducted or inducted, and that heat radiates from its source to other localities are principles which modern science accepts as fundamental facts. These great misconceptions gave rise to the theory that the ether is a quivering, elastic solid existing in space along the undulating waves of which light, heat, and all forms of energy can travel from one place to another. It is hereby conceded that all motion is expressed in waves, but those waves are not undulating. Energy cannot travel along waves because entire waves do not form in sequence. In other words, one whole wave is not completed before another begins. Waves are but effects which evolve as their cause evolves. Waves reproduce themselves part for part in sequence throughout the universe. Energy, therefore, cannot travel along waves which are not undulating but are reproducing themselves part for part. It cannot leap across waves which are lacking in troughs and crests. Light does not travel, it reproduces itself. The light and heat which appear to come from the star or the sun has never left the star or the sun. That which man sees as light and feels as heat is the reproduced counterpart of the light and of the heat which is its cause. The cause remains in the restricted area of the state of motion where it began its existence as an appearance until it expands into disappearance. That which man sees as a star is not a vision, a picture, an image, or a reflection of the star. It is the exact reproduced chemical counterpart of the star, integrated as light within the observer. That which is true of the star is true of the image of the mountain, or the brook, or the meadow violet. No idea of mind is seen at a distance. The state of motion, which represents the idea, is reproduced as light by regenerative impact within the observer. No idea of mind has place or position in time or space. All idea is universal. All generated states of motion degenerate by expansion. Expanding states of motion regenerate by impact against the inertial planes of higher potential. Man has a higher potential than his surrounding atmosphere. Any object seen by man is a generated potential which is higher than the expanded potential which intervenes between the object and the observer. The higher potential of the object discharges into the lower surrounding potential as the reproduced expanded counterpart of its particular state of motion and recharges within the observer. This reproducing, expanding counterpart impacts against the inertial plane of equal pressures which exists somewhere between the object and the observer. This impact causes a reversal of the process of reproduction of an expanding counterpart into reproduction of a contracting counterpart. The expansion of a state of motion is degeneration. The recontraction of expanding states of motion is regeneration. The law of reproducing idea is the principle of universality. All that is of everything else that is. The principle of reproduction is the principle of energy transmission. Energy transmission is conductive and inductive. Conduction is the lowering of high potential toward inertia. Induction is the raising of a low potential away from inertia. The electronegative, dissipative reaction impulse of energy transmission is conduction. The electropositive, generative action impulse of energy transmission is induction. Conductive energy resists the completion of the wave. Inductive energy ever leaps ahead in its eagerness to complete the wave. Conductive energy ever pulls toward inertia through the harmonic of the wave. Inductive energy ever pulls toward the overtones of the waves, which are the points of maximum opposition. A state of equilibrium is the state of inertia, which exists where pressures of two opposing high potentials of accumulated energy are equalized. Form of idea is a state of potential which is held together as form by the genero-active law of gravitation until it is torn apart by the radioactive law of radiation. All potential is constantly changing and interchanging. The potentials of all things are constantly rising because of their absorption of the discharged energy of all other states of motion. All mass is regenerated by absorption of the impacting radioactive energy of all other mass. Also, are all potentials constantly lowering because of their expanded reproduction in the surrounding lower potentials. All mass is degenerated by its own radiation. All mass is generated by accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. That which is generated must be radiated. All mass is degenerated by release of energy accumulation. Consider, for example, the regeneration of this planet by the radiation of the sun's high potential of energy impacting against its surface. Modern science presumes that heat travels in some mysterious manner across the vast 90 million miles of space between the sun and the earth, crossing that space in which a temperature of nearly absolute zero prevails, and then arriving here hot. Man feels warmth from the sun, and in some manner it must be accounted for. The theory arrived at is far from the truth. Somewhere in the intervening low potential between the sun and the earth is the inertia plane where the pressures of the potentials of the sun and earth are equalized. Against this inertial plane, the sun's cooling and expanding radiation impacts and reverse its expansion into contraction. The cooling, expanding, lowering potential reverses into heating, contracting, rising potential. By this impact, the expanding radioactive energy is reversed into contracting generoactive energy. By the impact of the sun's regenerated light emanations against this planet, all disintegrating matter is regenerated. Every living thing reverses its nightly intent to die and lives again. Flowers which have folded their petals reopen them and grow. Animal life, which has closed its eyes in sleep, becomes conscious once more and takes on new energy. The modern concept that solar energy is due to contraction is a misconception. The energy given off from the sun is energy that is being generated within the sun. No energy can be radiated that has not been or is not being generated. All radiating mass is generating. All opposite effects of motion are simultaneous in their expression. The sun is preponderantly generative. It is heating. The sun is in a lesser degree radiative. It is cooling. As the sun heats, it radiates. Radiation disintegrates. As the sun cools, it generates. Generation integrates. Here follows the law of the cycle of appearance and disappearance of form. Cold generates. Generation contracts. Contraction integrates, integration heats, heat radiates, radiation expands, expansion disintegrates, disintegration cools. Thus it may be seen that one opposite is always born of the other, which in its turn becomes the cause of the first. Thus it may be seen that the disintegration of the preponderantly generating sun becomes the regeneration of this planet. The coefficient of cold for an expanded volume of mass of low pressure and potential becomes the coefficient of heat for the same mass in a contracted volume of higher pressure and higher potential. The totals of heat and potential have not changed. They have merely changed their dimensions, nor has heat traveled. It has been reproduced. Magnetic flow in its magnetic orbit has been interrupted, that is all. The voice impacting against the cliff is an exact analogy. The voice regenerates into sound, and the positive charge of the cliff increases because of the impact. The heat from the sun has been disintegrated by radiation into the opposite of heat, which is cold. In radiation, however, the heat energy is not lost. Nothing can be lost. The energy which generated that heat is registered, together with the energy which radiated it, in an expanded counterpart of them both. No idea of mind, once begun, ever ends. No idea of mind ever began or ever ended. Chapter 12. This is a finite universe. Mind is all there is. It has no limitations as to shape, size, or volume, for these qualities are but appearances and have no real existence. Mind is limited, however, in its power, its knowledge, and its imagination, the last of which is its creative force. All of the effects of which mind is the cause are measurable in that they have the appearance of dimension. All dimension is limited, therefore must all cause be limited. Mind cannot create infinite complexity. Beyond the 10-octave cycle of cause and its included effects, mind cannot go. All effects evolve to their limit and devolve back again into cause without any change whatsoever taking place in cause. The limitations of mind are absolute. A limited universe cannot be an infinite universe. This concept is extremely difficult for man to comprehend, for man has a fixed concept of a non-existent effect called space. This misconception is born of his fixed idea of a universe separable into parts, all of which are related one to another in shape, size, volume, and the intervals of distance between them. To man, space and distance are fixed attributes of all his concepts and limit his comprehension. Man has built a misconcept of an infinite universe of infinite extension. Based upon his misconcept of space, he has reasoned that the universe cannot be finite or limited in extent, for if so, it must have shape or form. Also, he has reasoned that in order for it to have shape or form and be limited and finite, there must be something beyond. The objective universe of man's concept demands a beyond to a finite universe, but there is no beyond because there are no bounds nor boundaries in this formless universe. If space is non-existent, then extension or continuity is non-existent, and there can be no beyond. Beyond is a relative word. It is part of man's concept of objective relativity. It is a dimension. It is based on a belief in the reality of the unrealities of dimension and separableness in a universe of the one thing. Man's sense of reasoning does not accept the idea of the universe as a finite volume, such as a sphere hanging in a vacuum, beyond which, to his objective thinking, there must be more empty space. For this reason, he has formulated the belief that a finite universe is inconceivable to the human mind, therefore the universe must be infinite. Man's outer mind reasoning, which is objective, does not stop to consider that an infinite universe is more inconceivable to the human mind than a finite one. But that same reasoning is willing to accept the palpably incomprehensible and relegate it to the domain of divinity, which is admittedly incomprehensible, rather than concentrate the inner mind upon the higher octaves of thinking and learn the truth in light. Einstein rightly says that the universe is finite, but wrongly says that it has form. This great thinker declares his belief that the universe is spherical or elliptical. Einstein rightly says that any line of direction in that appearance, which man calls space, is curved, and that it is presumable that any continuous line in space would curve ultimately back to its point of beginning. Therefore, the universe must be either spherical or quasi-spherical. This curving, however, is not because the one substance of mind has a finite form or shape, but because all effects of motion are universal, and every effect of motion is an action which must end where it began in its final reaction. Direction, therefore, can never be in a straight line, but must always be curved. The reason why all lines must be curved lines, and also why all curved lines must be spiral in their curvature, will be written down in all exactness in its proper place. It is true that any apparent disturbance in the substance of mind returns unto itself, unto its own exact apparent point of beginning in a sequence of reproduced waves, which spell out the appearance of another non-existent effect called time. Man's fixed concept of the reality of time is a drag anchor holding him away from truth. His fixed concept of intervals of time in which one effect of motion in one part of the universe makes its appearance in another part is the result of such purely objective thinking that true concepts cannot replace them as long as this method of thinking persists. There are no parts to mind substance, no place and no position. Every part is the same part, every place and position the same place and position. Thinking is universal, and all effects of thinking are universal. More than this, they are simultaneously universal, for thinking is simultaneously universal. Even the little child in tossing a ball moves the universe simultaneously with that tossing. All motion is simultaneously universal in this universe of equilibrium. Sequence is an appearance due to form. It has no existence in itself, and without form it would not have even the appearance of existence. All form is purely a question of gravitational intensity, and therefore has no existence. Time itself is an effect of gravitation, and has no existence. Ike heat. It is but an indicator which registers sequence and integration, as heat registers resistance to integration. The reproductions and effects of motion and their attendant unrealities do not in any way change the universal substance of mind, the one reality, the one unchanging, indivisible, ultimate substance of all that is. Add to the non-existent appearances form, space, and time, two others which obsess man's mind, position, and dimension, and the relater can readily perceive that, with these non-existent unrealities firmly fixed in his mind as existent realities, it would be impossible for man to accept the idea of a finite universe. To do so, he would have to imagine a form hanging like a ball in a void, to which there must be an empty, inconceivable beyond. Man's outer mind is so accustomed to thinking reality into the unrealities of space, time, motion, form, position, and dimension of an objective universe that it is hard for him to adjust his thinking to a subjective universe in which the unrealities disappear into the reality of light. Man's inner mind thinks in light, freed in its thinking from the illusions of outer mind thinking. Einstein's error is in attaching to the substance of mind the attributes which belong solely to dimension of the substance in its appearance as form. Chapter 13. A Dimensionless Universe. Dimension is but an appearance, an effect of motion, and is non-existent. A mile between apparent objects is non-existent with the disappearance of the objects. Man's fixed concept of a universe of innumerable objects separated by relative and measurable distances unfits him for thinking of the universe in any but a relative sense. Man must think in light for true comprehension of mind. All men may think in the higher octaves of light, when they but comprehend, for with comprehension comes power. To think in light is not a new power being evolved by man like a new sense. It is a power which is already in every atom of man's composition. Man thinks in the low octaves of his own integration, almost unaware that the higher octaves are within him, for the lower octaves are superimposed upon the higher. The higher octaves of incredibly higher speeds are within the lower octaves of high potential but slow speed. Man may shift his thinking from the low speed of his outer mind to the higher speeds of his inner mind at will, even as he can shift the gears of his motor car. Man's thinking in his low octaves of bodily integration is like a man running his motor on low gear, ignorant of the fact that he has higher gears. Man's thinking in the higher octaves is like a man who is aware of higher gears in his car and knowingly uses them. Universal mind thinks in light and registers that thinking in light which is integrated into the idea of the thinking and suspended for a time in the lower octaves of light in the appearance of form. Man's outer mind is an integration of light in the lower octaves of that which he calls matter, and man's outer mind thinks in the dimensions or illusions of mind or matter. Matter and mind and light and energy are the same. They are one. They are existent in that they never disappear. They are constant. They are eternal. Dimension of mind or light or matter or energy is but the illusion of the mind substance due solely to more or less sustained motion. The substance which is mind or light or matter or energy and is eternally existent as cause must not be confused with its effects in motion, which are but dimensions and therefore non-existent. Dimension is purely objective. Outer mind thinking is objective thinking. Objective thinking is thinking in dimension. The substance of matter is eternal, but its illusions of dimension in form are fleeting. Matter is frozen light, crystallized light of man's own lower octaves of thinking. So even in outer mind thinking, man thinks in light, but it is meaningless to him. Man's inner mind is light of the high octaves of inspirational, ecstatic thinking. To man's inner vision, light is always light. It never disappears. Inner mind thinking is subjective thinking. Subjective thinking is dimensionless thinking. The inner mind of man knows no darkness. Light knows light, and all that is light. In the high speeds of inner thinking, matter is dimensionless. The universe of mind is a dimensionless universe. The universe of the idea of mind is a universe of dimension. The creating universe is the idea of mind. It is the divine concept of a universe of motion and the apparent separability of the one thing into the appearance of many individual things. Chapter 14, Concerning Dimension. The divine concept of a universe of form is the idea of the image-making faculty of mind. The divine concept is but an illusion of divine imagination. Mind thinks the ideas of mind into an illusion of form. Dimension appears when form appears. Form appears as a result of motion generated by the concentrative impulse of thinking. Form disappears as a result of motion radiated by the deconcentrative alternate reactive impulse of thinking. Creation, therefore, is but an illusion due to complex states of motion. All motion is comprehensible. All motion is caused by thinking mind. All motion is controllable by mind. All comprehensible motion is measurable. Measures are dimensions. Dimensions are the intervals which define the relation of one illusion of form to another. Dimension disappears with the disappearance of the illusions it defines. All illusions of form are but varying states of motion, locked into the separate states of potential which define those illusions. All states of motion are orderly and periodic. All states of motion, no matter how complex, are reducible to 10 octaves of 7 tones each, plus their midtones and their master tones. All creation is reducible to about 140 elements, which tell the entire complex story of God's thinking, just as all literature is reducible to 26 letters, which tell the entire complex story of all of man's thinking. Neither have any existence beyond their ability of expressing in form the manifesting idea of creative mind. The elements of matter are all of the same substance in varying states of motion. Gold is not one substance and carbon another, and phosphorus still another. Gold differs from carbon, and silicon differs from copper only by the relation of their intervals in motion, or the measurements of their separate dimensions, which when aggregated constitute their separate states of motion. The divine concept is not a universe of motion, but of idea in form. Motion is necessary to produce the form of idea. It is but an attribute of thinking. It is not a principle. Man labors in the bowels of the earth for metals, which he can create for himself with ease, when he fully comprehends the motion which has assembled the forms of those elements out of the idea of the divine concept. All that is in creation is fashioned into the form of idea by the 10 octave alphabets of thinking mind. Knowledge of the dimensions of each state of motion will give to man the power to produce from the most plentiful of them those which are most rare. That which nature has taken millions of years to produce through orderly interchange of potentials, man may produce in a few hours by forced interchange. There is no substance which nature can produce that man cannot also produce when he knows the dimensions which measure the illusion of form of the substance. Man has control of more energy than is necessary to transmute any one element or any compound into any other element or compound. All that he lacks is the knowledge of dimension in order that he may transmute that state of potential energy locked up in a state of motion called carbon into that other state of motion called gold, and he may have all that he desires at the cost of a very slight effort. The formula for measuring all dimensions of the various elements of matter will herein be written down and charted with all exactness, so that man's burden of heavy labor may be lightened. Years will pass before civilization will have adjusted itself thoroughly to the changed conditions which this new knowledge will bring to the world. But from this change a new civilization will spring. These are the dimensions, which, when known and measured, will make man master, in that he will be able to evolve or devolve or transmute or synthesize the elements at will. The first dimension is length, the second breadth, the third thickness, the fourth duration or time, the fifth sex, the sixth pressures, the seventh potentials, the eighth temperature, the ninth ionization, the 10th crystallization, the 11th valence, the 12th axial rotation, the 13th orbital revolution, the 14th mass, the 15th color, the 16th plane, the 17th tone, the 18th ecliptic. These dimensions are characterized by one outstanding peculiarity common to all of them: an orderly periodicity. Beyond these 18 dimensions and their inclusions, there are no more measurable intervals of motion. When all of these periodicities are charted and their mathematical calculations computed with exactness, it will be very simple for the ingenuity of man to devise the mechanical apparatus necessary to decrease any high potential into any lower one, or increase any low potential into any higher one. Acceleration and deceleration are now measurable. Temperature, tone, color, valence, ionization, and those pressures which are known are now measured. Mass is measurable. Known orbits are now measured, and the unknown ones will be measured when they have been made known. The waves which constitute the complex of all elements have already been computed. The spectrum has been divided, and the elements assorted into about 7,000 color lines of light, but they are as meaningless to man as the Hebrew language is to the Gentile. These 7,000 lines of light are the letters of the universal language of light, the language in which God speaks to man. When man knows this language, he will then think in it. When he thinks in light, he will then know that he is the Son of God, that he is one with God. When man thinks in light, he will then know that he is universal mind, that he is all that is, that he is thinking mind expressing his thinking in light, that he is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. He will then know that he is life, and that life is eternal, and that there is no death, and that he has neither place nor position in space or time, and that dimension is as though it were not, and that there is but one, and that one he, and you, and me, and the rolling hills, and the sands of the sea, and the clouds and stars, and the little violet blooming in the meadow. Already man has gone a far way toward the solving of the great secret of this creating universe, which lies hidden in the elements. Within God's alphabet of light, the locked secret has long awaited the master key of knowledge to open the doors to man. Man is mind. Mind creates and controls the energies of the elements. Mind may rearrange these energies and combine them in accord with its desire. Chapter 15. The formula of the locked potentials. Now must be constructed the cosmic clock by means of which all dimensions may be measured by one formula, as time is measured by the formula of hours, minutes, and seconds. Heretofore it has been written down that periodicity is an absolute characteristic of all effects of motion. With two exceptions, all dimensions of all effects of motion are of the same orderly octave periodicity. These two exceptions are of cyclic periodicity. Octave periodicity is an orderly progression to and from the maximum effect of each octave. Cyclic periodicity is an orderly progression to and from the maximum effect of the entire cycle. Thus, may it now be simply stated that all periodicities of all motion, of whatever nature, with two exceptions, may be built up on the following extremely simple formula. 4 diaces, 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 0 equals 1 minus 2 minus 3 minus 4 diaces. The two exceptions to this octave periodicity are mass and tone. Mass means weight. Tone means sound. Mass accumulates all down the entire 10 octaves. Tone lowers from the highest note down the cosmic keyboard to the lowest. The 0 represents inertial energy, and the numerals represent the orderly progressions in locked potentials and pressures and orbits. Thinking mind has devised these orderly progressions as its method of evolving the idea of universal thinking into the appearance of form and devolving it into the disappearance of form. The numerals of this formula are the hours of the cosmic clock. They are in the relative positions of the atoms of the elements and in the order of their respective varying dimensions. The seconds of the cosmic clock are the corpuscles, or light units, which make up the atom's structures. The hands of the clock are the indicating line of charging and discharging potential. The mainspring is the 10-octave cycle. 5 of these octaves are decelerating time dimension transformed by accumulation into power, and the other 5 octaves are power dimension released into accelerating time. The winding of the clock is the sublime 5-octave inhalation, and its unwinding is its 5-octave exhalation. The cosmic pendulum in its swinging ticks off the varying dimensions of all motion forever and forever with unfailing accuracy. But never does it depart from this simple formula. One by one, the relator will take up and analyze the 18 dimensions of the effects of motion. Neither temperature, nor valence, nor orbit, nor color, nor ionization, nor electric force, nor magnetic force, nor any effect of chemistry known to man, or still to become known. None of these, nor others herein unnamed, excepting mass and tone, can extend beyond this simple formula. It is meet that this simple formula of vast import should have a name so that it may be referred to in proper terminology. The formula of locked potentials shall be the name by which this formula shall be hereafter known. Chapter 16. Universal Oneness. Now must the simplest but the greatest of all laws of the universe be written down. Everything that is of everything else that is. Nothing is of itself alone. All created things are indissolubly united. This is the law of the entire substance of divine mind. This is the law of the souls of things. This is the law of love. It is the law of the oneness of the universe. All that is one. There are not two independently separate things in the entire universe. Individuality is non-existent. Individuality is but an appearance of separability and divisibility in a universe which is non-separable and non-divisible. No one can say, I alone am I, if one should say, I am I. He must say also to all men and all created things, I am thou, and thou art also I. The oneness of the universe is the sublimely simple one spiritual substance of divine mind. The one substance of mind is a living substance of the one living thinking, being of which all things in this universe are a part and to which they are indissolubly united. Light is that which makes of the one substance a living substance. Light is the life principle of mind. Light is the creating force of the universe. Light is all that is. Light is the living God. God is manifested in light. Light is the Holy Spirit, God, Father, Mother, nature, man, the oak, the rolling hills and mountain chains, the pounding sea and the sands of the sea, the babbling brook, the red apple hanging on the tree, the autumn haze, the storm, the stars in the heavens, the blade of grass and the kindly dew in the opening rose. All creating things are dependent upon light to hold them together in the appearance of individually separate things. As light is the substance of all things, and all things are dependent on light, all things are therefore interdependent. All are continuously interchanging by reproduction throughout the universe in continuity. No one created thing has time, nor place, nor position in idea. The idea of all creating things is universal. It is omnipresent as idea throughout the entirety of mind, but the counterpart of idea in all created things is sequential in time and place. The counterpart of idea is the reproduced idea. The reproduced idea is a part of the basic idea. This is a universe of reproduction. Production and reproduction of idea of thinking mind is the sole result of thinking and the sole reason for thinking. Idea and reproduction of idea are universal in sequence as states of motion are universal in sequence. And idea and reproduction of idea are multiplied as appearances in motion in opposition, of which the pulsations of thinking mind are the cause. There is no other cause. There is no other motion. Each idea and each reproduced counterpart of idea has but the appearance of time and place and position from which it does not appear to depart. Still is it of all the universe a part. The rose blooming in my garden is of Arcturus, a part as it is of you and me. The universe sways to the swaying of the rose in my garden. Every particle of matter in this universe has its own magnetic pole through which it is connected with the magnetic pole of each other particle of matter in the universe, and through which each particle is affected by the ever-changing condition of every other particle in the universe. This is a universe of equilibrium in motion, the continuity of which could not be maintained except through the interdependence of all apparently separated units. Everything that is of everything else that is. Nothing is of itself alone. All created things arc indissolubly united. All is God, and God is all. God is light. Light is all. Creation is the sublime idea of the sublime being. The sublime is always simple. With creation, simplicity seems to end and complexity to begin. Complexity belongs to creating things. Man's outer mind is a heavy and complex mind. It knows not the sublimity of simplicity. The inner mind of man is attuned to the ecstatic meter of divine thinking. The inner mind of man knows the sublimity of deific simplicity. The inner mind of man knows light. Everything that is of everything else that is. Nothing is of itself alone. The perfume of the rose is part of the rose, and it is also a part of man and of the winds and of the garden wall. The perfume of the rose is light as the rose is light, and so also is man and the winds and the garden walk. All that is light. Nothing is of itself alone. He who knows this greatest of all laws knows love. Love is a realization of the oneness of the universe. Love is the ecstasy of inspired thinking. God's thinking is ecstatic thinking. God is love. Until man knows from within his inner mind this law of the oneness of all things, it has no meaning for him. When man knows this law in his heart, he will have no limitations. When man knows this law so that its reaction within the soul of man is that of ecstatic, inspired contemplation, he will then begin to know the meaning of love. Unlimited power will then be his. His thinking will then be true thinking. All power is in true thinking. Thinking true may be likened unto a violin string sounded by the great master. 10,000 other strings tuned to the same pitch would sing in unison, unplayed upon. 10,000 other strings not so attuned would not know the ecstasy. They would be as though they were not. Inspired thinking is thinking in tune with divinity. Inspired thinking is thinking in exact pitch with the high octaves of divine thinking. The rhythm of light in the high octaves of light is the measure of true pitch and true thinking. True thinking of the inner mind makes true thinking of the outer mind. The outer mind thinks not in ecstatic measure. As a man thinks in his inner mind, so is he. The inner mind within all men and within all things is divine mind. The inner mind of man is tuned to the higher speeds of ecstatic thinking. Man may know the ecstasy of his own divine thinking, if he will but tune his thinking to the high speeds or ecstatic meter of divine mind, which is within all men and all things. When man will so attune his thinking, then will he think in light. The inner mind of man alone can think in light. Inner thinking is ecstatic thinking. The outer mind of man cannot know light. The outer mind cannot know ecstasy. When man thinks in light, he will then not the perfection of divine idea. He will be universal genius. Imperfection of idea cannot exist. The entire idea of thinking mind is good. There is no evil. There is no imperfection. That which man calls the created universe is the idea of thinking mind. The idea of mind is perfect as mind in itself is perfect. Perfection of idea is truth. Imperfection of idea is electromagnetically impossible in this universe of equilibrium, as we shall see in later chapters of this book. Thinking true in light will give to man all power. He will have no limitations except those that are universal. With his feet on the electrodes of the universe and his eyes in the high heavens, impossibilities of yesterday will be simple achievements of today. With this knowledge from within, man can have dominion over all nature and all things. Man can have dominion over his own body and command it to health and to beauty and to comeliness. With a realization of this law in his heart, he will love and be loved of all men and all creating things, and he will know all things. All knowledge will come to man when he knows this law in his heart. All knowledge exists. Thinking man has all knowledge. Inspired man knows the law of love in his heart with the oneness of the universe. All knowledge is existent in the universe and is the inheritance of thinking man from divine mind, God, and Father of man, and of all creating things. This inheritance of all knowing awaits every man to use as and when he desires that knowledge.